Hello, what's up, everyone? Welcome back. So, today we'll be talking about dealings. Okay, so what are dealings? Wait, let's run it back. Okay, so today we'll be talking about dealings. So, without further ado, let's go. Firstly, what are dealings? Dealings are any transaction on alienated land, excluding caveat and promissory order. I can remember what PO is, and it is outlined in section 5. This is the definition of dealings. Then we'll move on to section 205, which outlines the types of dealings that you can do on an alienated land. Firstly, transfers, lease, charges, and easements. Now, these four need registration, and there are two types of dealings that don't require registrations, if I'm not mistaken. Liens, as well as I can't remember which the other one is, but we'll just ball. Okay, so Section 301 of the NLC states the instruments fit for registration. So instruments is basically a form. How can a form be suitable for a registration? So to fill in the necessary details of a form, you must have the necessary characteristics or what are needed on the land to be transferred or to be leased, macam tu lah, something like that. Okay. Now, section 296, documents to accompany an instrument. So you cannot just submit a form macam tu saja. You have to accompany that form with a few other documents that support your registration, which is outlined in section 294 lah. Okay. So this is the introductory provisions that you need to know. Next, we'll move on to the types of dealings terus. We'll only cover transfers and lease sebab tak muat the whole whiteboard to cover all four, but it's okay. All three. So the third one I'll cover in another video with another topic lah macam tu. Firstly, transfer. Transfer is the transfer of land lah macam tu. It's quite easy to understand. Okay. In section 205, section 2, only those mentioned in section 43 can transfer. Those ni refers to anyone. Those two refers to anyone who is in section 43 that can transfer. So orang yang boleh transfer, orang-orang tu mentioned in section 43. Okay, so the terms used in the concept of transfer of land is the transferor, which is the person who transfers the land, and the transferee, who is the person who receives the land. So what can be transferred? Transferables. What can be transferred from one person, from the transferor to the transferee? It is outlined in section 214 subsection 1. Now notice that in my whole whiteboard, a lot of the provisions I only write down the provisions without further elaboration because contoh for section 2 of 214 subsection 1, dia ada A, B, C and so forth. So it will take up a lot of my space in the whiteboard. That's why I'm not writing it down. So just know that the transferables, what can be transferred, as well as other provisions nanti, it's mentioned under 214 yang ada banyak lagi lah, A, B, C, D, E, so on and so forth. Okay. So in the case of Tan Chiu Tu against T Kim Hui, it has been long established that the first title holder can transfer the land to himself as well as the second title holder holding undivided shares. This basically uh, not to say it's unrelated, but it's just something in and of itself. Okay. So a few restrictions of transfer of land is outlined under section 214 subsection 2. So 214 subsection 1 refers to what can be transferred, and subsection 2 refers to the restrictions of transfer. Okay. Now we're going to be on a little tangent here about estate land transfer. So estate land transfer, firstly, we'll define it in section 214A subsection 11. It is the agricultural land under one or more titles, and its area or aggregate area is more than 40 hectares. And lastly, the area is contiguous. Contiguous. And contiguous is referring to land separated only by roads, railways, or waterways. So if you want to transfer an estate land, you must refer to section 214A subsection 1, which states that the estate land board must approve of the transaction. And what if you don't have approval by the ELB but you want to transfer? It is in section subsection 10 and 10A. If unapproved, there will be penalty imposed. Okay, so what is the appropriate form to use when you want to transfer a land? You have to refer to section 214A subsection 4, which is the form of, which is form 14D. So, in the case of kumpulan sua betong senia berhad against azan senia berhad another, non-compliance of this provision is fatal. That means the agreement or the transfer is void. Macam tu. So there is a little bit of historical development with regards to section 214A subsection 4. So uh, basically I've summed it up here. Tapi there were few events leading up to this amendment. And basically we're just gonna state the amendment itself lah. So in the 2001 amendment of the section of two of the section in the 2001 amendment of section 214A subsection 4, any any transfer is subject to approval from the estate land board. However, if the sales and purchase agreement without approval of the ELB is being submitted, is it valid or not valid? So we can see that in the case of Yakin Tenggara Sdn Bhd against RHB Bank Sdn Bhd and RHB Bank Berhad and others, the agreement is void at initio. That means it is void from the beginning itself. So what is the procedure of transferring the land? You have to first know the proper form to use. Okay, sorry. This form refers to 14D, refers to estate land transfer tau. So the proper form here is different from the proper form here because this refers to estate land specifically. This one is for general, in general. Okay. So, in section 206, subsection 1, para A and 207, you need the proper forms, which is, the proper form is then outlined in section 215, subsection 1, which is form 14A. So, there are a lot of provisions here that refers to the steps of transferring, the procedure of transfer. Just read it lah. First, you have to transfer. Upon the completion, the title moves from the transferor to the transferee. And then in section 304, section 1 and subsection 1 and subsection 2, the registrar transfers, signs and seals an instrument. And lastly, section 215, subsection 3, the transferee takes over the land with regards to a lot of rights lah, outlined in the provision itself. So that is it. That is about it about transfer. I think I might have missed a little bit here, but because my notes saya rasa for me it's quite complete, but when I compare it to others, it's a little bit incomplete. There's a bit of here, a bit of facts here and there. So don't rely 100% on this one. Okay. Next, we'll move on to lease. Lease is the concept of granting rights to exclusive possession of land for a given term. That means the term is fixed and there is no ownership change. That means the proprietor is still considered the proprietor, the owner of the land. Okay. This is also outlined in section 5 of the NLC, the registered lease or sublease. And the lease must be registered under the registrar to first create rights enforceable by third parties, and secondly to legally protect the lessee of the land. So the terms of a lease is the lessor who leases the land and the lessee who receives the lease of land. Okay. Now, what are the elements of a lease? Because you know that lease is not an ownership change point. It's actually like, I'll give you this land for this amount of time, but the land is still mine. So how can you determine whether something is a lease or not? These are the the four elements. Firstly, exclusive possession. Now the leasee can enter the land as well as excluding any persons from entering the land. So the property or the land is, I wouldn't say effectively theirs, but they are in control of the land. They can enter. They can also prohibit anyone from entering the land. Secondly, there must be an intention to create the lease between the lessor and the lessee. We can infer this intention from the agreement that they have signed. Thirdly, a definite period. Now, the period of lease must be first specific and secondly capable to ascertain. Specific means that there must be the amount of time or the duration of time must be specifically spelled out. It cannot be like antara 10 ke 15 tahun. It cannot be like that. It must be like antara 10 tahun sahaja ataupun 15 tahun sahaja, something like that. And capable to ascertain means you can count the duration of time. It's not like as long as the sun shines. How can you can count that, right? Because basically every day the sun shines, you cannot count that. So it must be specific as well as capable to ascertain. Fourth is in consideration of the rent payment. Okay, who has the power to lease? In section 221 of the NLC, the proprietor can grant the lease either wholly or partly of his land. That means if there is a land, contoh this is the land, then he wants to grant wholly. Wholly means the whole of the land or partly. Partly means I'll just draw another one lah. Okay, partly means maybe only this portion. He can do that macam tu. Okay, so how long can a lease last? There are a few requirements of a term for a lease. Firstly, in section 221 subsection 2, a lease must last for more than 3 years. And specifically in subsection 3, there are maximum terms for a lease. So for the lease, for leasing a whole land, which is this, the maximum is 99 years. So you can lease the whole land for 99 years. 99. However, if you lease only a piece of land, it is only up to 30 years. Macam tu. So that is the term for a lease. Okay, next we'll move on to the power to sublease. So the power to sublease, as we can see, the wording is sublease. That means this is the power of the lessee. Okay, the lessee can, like we have established just now, has the power to sublease as outlined in section 221 subsection 1. He is permitted to sublease. However, he must comply with subsections 2 to subsections 4, which outline the guidelines of a sublease. Okay, what are the limitations to a lease? Okay, in 225 subsection 1, lease is subject to A and B. This is the actual paragraph, so it corresponds directly to section 225 sub 1 para A and para B of the NLC. Firstly, limitations in the NLC itself or other written law, as well as B, which is restriction in interest. Okay. Next, in 225 subsection 2, the lease cannot be given to two or more bodies or persons. So it must be given to one person or one body only, as well as 226, which I did not write down because I forgot to write it down, but I can't remember what it is. So it's okay. So the instrument to lease, instrument is basically a form. What form have we got to use to lease a piece of land? We can see that in section 221 subsection 4, the form used is form 15A. And what are the effects of a lease? In section 221 subsection 4, the lease takes effect after registration. That is why we go back to this. A lease requires registration. So once it is registered, the lease takes effect lah macam tu. So what if the lease is unregistered? Okay, we can see that the general rule is in section 206, subsection 1, para B, which states that the lease is inoperable. However, we see that in subsection 3, it states that again subsection 1 para B, dia macam pergi balik ke sini, does not affect contractual operation. So basically, even though the general rule states that it is inoperable, however, back to contract law still permits the contractual operation of an unregistered lease, because we see that in the case of Margaret Chua against Ho Swee Kyu, the agreement is still valid under equity. So this plays with a lot of other laws macam tu, and this judgment, this principle is upheld in the case of Ong Heng Hua Realty Sdn Bhd against Tioh Chai Siok, SIOK. SIOK. Okay, that is it. I am very much sure that I am missing a few points here and there, but generally from an overview perspective, this is pretty much covering what transfer is and what lease is. And yeah, for this topic, I am pretty sure you have to read up yourself to touch on some of the things that I may have missed, but basically this is it. Okay, that's about it. See ya.